This is the nature of things.
Until very recently, our best and brightest scientists and physicians believed that the adult brain couldn't change. Our brain circuits were formed and finalized in childhood. Now we discover that the brain is plastic, meaning changeable. But not all change is good. That changing brain can actually do us harm. Obsessive-compulsive disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, and even schizophrenia. But the mind can harness the damaged brain's plasticity to change itself. And now we are finding new treatments for mental diseases and disorders once thought incurable.
When you would tell people, hey, this is your brain sending you a false message, it would help them.
We might actually change the whole course, the whole trajectory of someone's life.
This is medicine. This has outcomes that are medical. It changes brains physically. It changes them chemically. It changes them functionally.
There's a lot that can go wrong inside your head. Phobias, panic attacks, schizophrenia destroy lives. But scientists now know that the brain can change. It has the amazing ability to reorganize itself throughout life, allowing us to treat mental disorders.
My name is Dr. Norman Doidge, and I wrote a book called The Brain That Changes Itself. The discovery of neuroplasticity is the discovery that our brains can change their structure and function through mental experience alone. It signals the most important change in our understanding of the brain in 400 years, because for 400 years, we thought of the brain as though it were like a machine with parts, and that view of the machine-like brain gave rise to a neurological fatalism, because it meant people who were born with brain damage or who sustained brain damage as they developed were condemned to live with it, because machines do many glorious things, but they don't grow new parts, and they can't reorganize themselves. All of us have worries. We worry because we are intelligent creatures. The same intelligence that allows us to plan, imagine, hypothesize, also allows us to anticipate negative outcomes. There are many kinds of worriers, but among those who suffer the most are people with obsessive-compulsive disorder, or OCD. Their problem, though all in the head, goes far beyond what others might experience, precisely because it's in the head and therefore inescapable. It's a disorder that can often be treated by understanding neuroplasticity. This is the discovery of UCLA's Dr. Jeffrey Schwartz.
People get intruding into their stream of consciousness unwanted thoughts and urges. You basically have an inner conflict where you get ensnared in really bad obsessive-compulsive disorder because it gets worse and worse and worse the more you relent to it. So it's a nasty thing.
I would say that OCD basically feels like you're trapped in your own mind. It feels like there's almost like a puppeteer, really, kind of making us do things and rituals that we don't want to do, but we have to.
You're dealing with such a high level of anxiety and high level of stress that you physically are sick.
And this is happening day after day, hour after hour. It wasn't long before I fell into a depression.
Contamination fears, I constantly was washing my hands. It even got to the point where I would Lysol my head and face and arms and legs.
You end up falling apart.
I always felt guilty, which is part of my OCD, my feeling that I'm always doing something, sinful. And I found, oh, wow, I found a way to get rid of that feeling. I could pray to God and ask for forgiveness. I would pray throughout the day, even though, like, when I'm taking care of the kids, or I'm cooking, or I'm changing their diaper, I would say, oh, forgive me for this. And I would kept praying for the same thing over and over again. But when I pray, I didn't felt like I was forgiven. That guilty feeling never left me.
Cleaning and washing compulsions. When I first was starting to get those incredibly uncomfortable, anxious feelings and not knowing why, those were really difficult times where I was very low. I feel like I'm trapped and locked into this, and like I have to do this even though I don't want to. While I'm seeing people around me that aren't having to do this, what the hell is going on with me?
There's a worry circuit in the brain, and when we worry, three things usually happen. First, a part of our brain behind our forehead detects the mistake, and it sends a signal to another part of the brain called the anterior cingulate. The anterior cingulate makes you anxious about the mistake, so you'll stay focused on it until you've corrected. And finally, once you have corrected it, a third part of the brain called the caudate functions like a mental gear shift and shifts you on to the next thing. But in people with OCD, that mental gear shift is very sticky. It stays stuck, so they try to correct the mistake again and again. Each time they correct the mistake, their anxiety drops very briefly. Because neurons that fire together wire together, they get the idea that to lower anxiety, they should keep correcting the mistake. It works in the short run, but in the long run, it makes them more obsessive.
The vicious cycle of obsessive-compulsive disorder is the more you wash, the more you check, the worse it gets.
This makes a lot of plastic sense, because the more time he spends thinking about germs, the more he inadvertently wires the connection between germs and danger into his brain, rather than strengthening the thing he has to strengthen, which is that mental gear shift.
If the brain can get worse by people doing the symptom again and again, maybe if I can get them through understanding to resist acting on the urge, then they can strengthen alternative brain circuitry and quiet down the pathological brain circuitry, and that process, when done regularly, changes how the brain works.
Schwartz wondered whether patients could shift the caudate manually by first becoming aware they were having an OCD attack, and then using their constant, effortful attention to actively focus on something wholesome besides the worry.
Human beings uniquely have the capacity to have true insight, true awareness, the capacity to stand outside yourself, to use a term called the impartial spectator, and we are not what our brain is.
This ability to develop a third-party awareness is difficult to master, but the key to Schwartz's treatment.
The impartial spectator tells me it's not real. This is just a brain hiccuping, the brain doing what brain does.
But I always knew there was almost like a part of me, like a different me, that was sort of, you know, inside saying like, this is irrational. This is, you know, is a disorder.
Don't believe everything you think. I mean, don't believe everything you think turns out to be a very good one-liner for understanding obsessive-compulsive disorder, because your brain is making you think stuff that clearly is just due to a brain circuit gone rogue.
The therapy devised by Schwartz draws on ancient Buddhist teachings about mindfulness. Schwartz's treatment is divided into 4 steps to harness the plastic properties of the brain to work for the sufferer, not against him. The first step is for a person having an OCD attack to step back and mindfully relabel what's happening to him, so that he realizes that what he's experiencing is not a dangerous attack of germs, but an attack of OCD.
When I get an obsessive thought and a compulsive urge, that I can, you know, step 1, I can relabel it as such.
Call it OCD. Don't say, I have an urge to wash my hands. Say, OCD is causing me to feel like I have to wash my hands.
The next step is to reattribute those thoughts and urges to the pathological brain circuitry and to remember how brain lock occurs in the 3 parts of the brain.
So you reattribute the fear to something your brain is doing.
The 3rd step is to refocus, to manually turn one's attention away from the pathological thoughts and urges onto a constructive, wholesome behavior.
Whatever is bothering me, I go and do something else.
That's where the neuroplasticity comes in, because when you're using your brain now in a constructive way and focusing your attention in a constructive way, you stabilize alternative brain circuitry.
The final step occurs as you notice that your obsessions and compulsions are beginning to fade, and you revalue them, realizing they are worthless distractions to be ignored.
When you do that regularly, you really do start changing your brain. Now when you get the urge to wash, the urge to check, you no longer go, that's me. You go, oh, I know what that is. That's OCD. And now your brain is working with you instead of against you.
When Schwartz and his team scanned the brains of their improved patients, they found that the firing of the sticky gear shift had normalized. The brain had changed its structure in response to thought.
You're making major changes in the deep aspects of your biological nature constructively through insight, awareness, effort, and focused attention.
The OCD is kind of under my control. I feel like, wow, this is something that everybody should know. If I could go on a mountaintop and shout how great it is, I would do it. I feel like mindfulness is the way to peace inside of you.
My hands, they used to, from all the washing, they used to bleed. They used to crack at the knuckles. They used to hurt. My hands are sort of a small, like, physical testament to where I am today. The ideas that Dr. Schwartz has exposed me to, I'm eternally grateful, because they've allowed me to shape my own brain and shape the outcome of my disorder in my life.
Self-directed neuroplasticity is a real thing. You can use it to help you with your suffering.
But there are many kinds of suffering, and new advancements in neuroplasticity can rescue us from the horrendous memories that would haunt anyone.
I sort of lost 10 or 12 years of my life. I would have sort of flashbacks and nightmares. Before this happened, I was settled down, 3 golden retrievers, a girl that I loved, nice home. Something happened and I couldn't have that kind of life. Because every day I would wake up and I wanted to die. I didn't want to go through another day.
PTSD is a neuroplastic disorder par excellence. A person with an often normally functioning nervous system experiences a crushing mental event that changes the meaning of their lives and fundamentally alters their nervous system. Now, as they repeatedly relive the event, it wires itself more and more deeply into their minds, further disrupting normal functioning.
Everyone was able to move on with life, but I felt like I was left behind. Sounds or anything could trigger it, and then all of a sudden you were down in this pit again.
The sound of a dog barking, the sound of kids screaming, it would just send me right back. The Rottweiler grabbed the back of my leg and started whipping me around like I was a rag doll. I could see my son trying to get out of his stroller, and it caught the attention of the dog, and the dog turned and lunged at the baby's head.
I came home from work that day and found my brother hanging in our front hallway. It's never going to be something that I'll be able to forget.
The fact that our brains are plastic also makes them vulnerable and allows trauma to alter them and create post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. But Elaine Brunet, a clinical psychologist at McGill University, has found a way to use this same neuroplasticity to cure patients of this debilitating disorder.
The sad truth is that every day people are exposed to trauma and are at risk of developing post-traumatic stress disorder. Rape victims, child abuse, car accident victims, and you are changed by your experience and you're never going to be the same again. Never. We have developed a new treatment for PTSD, and this new treatment could change the way psychologists and mental health professionals treat people.
During the course of experiencing a trauma, a person and even the brain is so overwhelmed that they cannot properly file away the thoughts, feelings, and perceptions that are happening into memory. And thus, they keep emerging over and over again as though they're happening in the present.
It's like you're in hell and there's no escape. It's living with a bad memory, and the bad memory is so vivid that you're reliving it many times a day. I would really get sick. The sweating, the shaking, and the feeling like I just wanted to hide in a closet somewhere in the dark so nobody could even know that I existed.
What is required for the treatment to work is that the memory needs to be brought back.
Researchers have found that each time any mental event is brought to conscious awareness, there's a moment of heightened plasticity in its circuit. This provides an opportunity to alter that circuit and its connections, and in the case of trauma, file those mental events in their proper place in the past.
So in the treatment that we have developed, we have people think of their traumatic event under the influence of a medication. Propranolol dampens this emotional memory.
In this treatment, the patient is given a low dose of propranolol, an old drug typically used to relieve hypertension. Then, they write out a narrative account of the trauma in explicit detail.
And then they read the account of their trauma, and that lasts less than 10 minutes.
C'est le 3 septembre, 9h20. Il fait beau et je viens de commencer mon travail au magasin.
Then they come back the following week, take the drug and read their written account of their trauma, and they do this once a week for 5 more weeks.
When I first tried this, I did not think it would work because it's deceptively simple. We find that about 3/4 of the people no longer meet the criteria for PTSD after this treatment. It really changes their lives.
While working with Alain, when I wrote down what had happened to me, I found out I still had that rage. That night, I remember coming home, having nightmares again, major, and I was going, what am I getting into? And after each session, I had to read the whole story, and it was always difficult for me. La jeune commis vient de rentrer et je lui dis de s'occuper des clients pendant que je prépare ma commande. Pendant ce temps, le gars qui avait l'air nerveux me dit, get in the back store. And we walk to the back towards the safe, and he has the gun on my head and back.
La jeune commis arrive avec l'autre gars. Elle aussi est attachée. Elle tremble, elle pleure. Encore une fois, il vous met le gun sur votre tête et vous demande...
Je suis certain, comme je suis un témoin, qu'il va revenir et me tuer. Mon cœur bat très vite.
When I was 12, I had to have my tonsils taken out. So I was alone in the hospital. When I walked into this doctor's office, the first thing I noticed was that the walls were padded, and then he closed the door, locked it, and put the key in his pocket, and I thought, oh my God. When he started touching me, I knew that I was just caught in a trap, and that he would do whatever he wanted to do with me. When you're 12 years old and you have no idea that a man can hurt you in this way, and it was especially degrading and extremely humiliating.
Le gros noir dit à l'autre gars, go pop him. À ce moment, mon cœur bat fort et je suis sûr qu'il va mourir. Je sens le gun sur ma tête, mais il frappe la tête seulement. Je tombe par terre et je joue le mort. I think it was the 5th week. I had to read the story again, and then while reading it, all of a sudden, there was a sort of I didn't have any attachment to it. It was like reading a book. It was violent, but it wasn't me. It was something else. And I felt like smiling and laughing. And then after, I remember telling my doctor, saying, you guys have something very hot here. This is going to help a lot of people.
Because neurons that fire together wire together, every time a person who's been traumatized remembers their trauma, they're at risk of more deeply connecting the remembered trauma with the firing of the threat system. But it also turns out to be the case that neurons that fire apart wire apart. So by chemically blocking the arousal of the threat system while narrating the trauma, we can actually disconnect them. We can desynchronize them because neurons that are out of sync fail to link.
The memories don't make me suffer anymore. I still remember occasionally, but I can watch a movie that has something close to the event happening, and I don't even relate it back to my memory anymore. And then I remember, oh, I'm cured of this.
All of our new treatments for trauma take advantage of the fact that when the patient is remembering the traumatic event, the network for that memory enters a more malleable, labile state. What is unique about Alain Brunet's approach is that it uses our understanding of neuroplasticity at both the mental and biochemical levels.
We're not trying to erase people's memory. We just want to transform it into something that they can recall willingly, and which is certainly a bad memory, but a memory that belongs to the past.
You still remember everything. It's just that you don't remember them very often anymore, and it doesn't hurt you anymore. So you can just go on with life. It's a bad memory, just like everybody has bad memories, and it's not a trauma anymore.
Some of my dear friends that have known me for years, they said, oh, the old Joel is back. I have ambition, I have a drive to live again, and I appreciate things. And it can be just simple emotions, falling in love again, and wow, that's fun. I'd miss that.